Good morning. It is Tuesday, August 23rd. We're in the chamber for our meeting. We have a full slate of commissioners, county administrator, and the clerk of the board. And at this time, I'll call the meeting to order. If you please rise to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, first item on the agenda is the August 9th Commissioner meeting minutes. Is there any additions, revisions, or corrections? Okay. Next, we'll move down to office business, vouchers.
We have 2 vouchers today. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $516,234.82 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
This is not a consent item, so I'll second, but I would appreciate a moment of brief discussion.
Been a motion and a second on the presentation of the voucher for
Fund expenditures.
with discussion. Go ahead, Commissioner Peck.
So we have 2 different types of approvals for spending taxpayer money. One of them, well, actually several, but these routine ones are typically either payroll or they are fund expenditures. Fund expenditures are miscellaneous costs and expenses that include a variety of things, in particular allowances for elected officials that are statutorily authorized, vehicle allowances, other miscellaneous expenses and costs. When we receive these, they are signed by 2 representatives of the Franklin County Auditor's Office who are our audit function, and they review each and every one of these expenditures to ensure that, to their knowledge and understanding, that these are appropriate, lawful expenditures. And then they forward them through the county administrator, who also looks at them, and then they come to this board for the final legal approval. I thought it was important for people to understand when we talk about fund expenditures and warrants that the public knows exactly what we're talking about and what that process looks like. So 2 members of the auditor's office go through each of these and sign them off as appropriate for payment. Then they go to the county administrator and then to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we have a motion for the $516,234.82 for the fund expenditures. All in favor, say aye.
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 Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $1,084,288.41 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for salary clearing and emergency management. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we'll move down to the consent agenda. I believe there are 6 items on the consent agenda today.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 6 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the 6 consent agenda items. I'd like to have some discussion on item number 5. So, Mr. Johnson, on approving the opioid class action settlement, I saw the total amount, and I talked to our one of our legal people downstairs, and he said that the Olympia will get probably half of those funds from the state, and then the counties will get the other half.
I believe that's accurate.
Okay, and so we're looking in the neighborhood of around $300,000 each year for 17 years.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Okay. Well, with that, there's
Mr. Chair, as long as we've opened for discussion, I'd like discussion on item 4.
Go ahead.
So, like both of you gentlemen, I'm sure I read the read-ahead materials, and I think it's useful to note that we have a competitive process so that the taxpayers have the benefit of various businesses bidding and competing so we can get the lowest cost when we purchase vehicles. And there's an exemption in there for emergency situations and for market conditions in particular, which is exactly what we're experiencing now. So I think this is entirely appropriate. But I do have some question in my mind about when we suspend the normal bidding process and we decide to do something simpler, quicker, locally, do we make a practice of calling 2 or 3 local dealers, or do we just call one? And if we just call one, who decides which one we call? Does anybody know?
When I read through this, it wasn't the matter of competition, it was a matter of availability. And they're not available. And so we're finding ourselves, somebody might take that bid, but they don't have them available, and we're waiting on them. So we're looking to get the vehicles. Am I right, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, if I may, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, if I may first, I'd like to respond to that, because that wasn't my question. I mentioned that the bidding process is there generally to get the best deal for taxpayers, and that the statute allows when market conditions, especially like the ones we have now, make it difficult to get vehicles in a timely manner, which is exactly what we're experiencing, that it makes this approach entirely appropriate, and I certainly support it. My question was, when we abandon that competitive bid process, what is the new process? Does somebody just pick up a phone and call any dealer that they want? And if so, who does that and who chooses? Or do we go out to a couple, 2 or 3 local dealers with phone calls? What is the process for doing that is what I'm interested in learning.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I had a lengthy conversation with Mr. Rochlo, who's kind of the purchasing agent for the sheriff's office. And as you stated, it is a serious matter of availability. So they are calling multiple dealers. They're online looking at internet ads for who has vehicles available that meet the specifications of law enforcement. In a, I hate to use the word normal because I don't know what that means anymore, but in a normal environment, they would selectively bid from a number of dealers that have an inventory of vehicles that would fit the need, but that's just not the case right now. In both the new and used automobile market, it's very difficult to find vehicles that can meet the specs. Once we purchase the vehicle, we then have to bring it in and install the lights and the radios and the painting and all the things that go with converting that from a civilian vehicle to a law enforcement vehicle. But yeah, they're looking at a number of different vendors, and typically you find one vehicle at a vendor. If it's available, that's where you go, and you go down to the next vendor and see what they have available.
So I take it the answer to my question then is they, which I presume is the department seeking the vehicle,
Correct.
picks up the phone and calls any dealer that they wish and looks wherever they can find a vehicle, and then they can proceed.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Sheriff
Thanks.
Raymond sounds like he wants to comment on that.
please come to the sheriff. Sheriff, please come to the mic. We're finding this same thing with farming, equipment, everything. We're coming up short on everything right now because of the times.
All
Yeah.
our vehicles have been purchased on state bid
That's right.
to this point, and still are being purchased on state bid. But in this example, we have now the car companies canceling orders on us. For example, we bought 2 F-150s and they called and said, we're not building them, figure out something else. So we started looking around.
Yeah.
We bought a Dodge Durango off a state bid, and we have a Tahoe coming off a state bid from McCurley. But whenever we go outside of that, I make sure that our requests stay right here in the Tri-Cities if we purchase cars outside of that bidding process. In fact, I'm even worse than that. I make sure that they're being bought here in Pasco versus the other dealerships, if that helps.
Well,
We have to do that.
yeah, you said when that helps. I appreciate you phrasing it that way, because really I don't have a question or a concern about the statute. It's clear. I just wanted everybody to know what the process is when we go outside of the norm and we use this market-based emergency exception, which I think in this case is entirely appropriate. I think you've been waiting 8 months to get a vehicle, which Actually, you ordered, I think, 5, and you got a couple, and they told you, forget the others. So it's clearly a situation that warrants that. But when we're spending public money, I'd just like to have daylight on who's spending it, who's making the call, what dealerships are they picking. And let me be really, really clear. I want to foot stomp emphasize this point. I'm not suggesting that anybody has got a friend at a dealership or anything like that, okay? No improprieties. I have no belief that there's anything like that, no evidence of it. But when we're spending the public's money, I think scrutiny and daylight are important, and I trust the individuals involved here. I just want to know what the process is. And it sounds like you're lucky to even find a vehicle, let alone find a vehicle at a particular dealership that you might want to go to. So I don't have a concern. I just want everybody to understand what we're doing.
Right. We reach out to fleet services if that's helpful at the dealerships.
Sure.
Send a little-
Well, nowadays, it's wherever you can find them, sounds like.
It is.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
actually have had cars canceled from 2020 that we never got. Now we're 2021.
Sure.
And they're starting to cancel those, and we're actually to a point now that we don't have enough cars to go around. We're actually putting new motors in 5- and 6-year-old cars trying to limp along. So,
Yeah.
yes.
No, I appreciate the explanation.
And I think if we ever get back to normal, we'll be right back to the bidding process, just like we have had it in the past. So with that, we have a motion and a second for the 6 consent items on the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Move down to the Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, the past week, that time of year again, so we're starting to take a look at the 2023 budget. So spend some time beginning to analyze that. Got a couple of significant HR issues that I'm working on, one in actually our HR office as well as the Happel Center management team. I met with McKinstry this last week as we're getting prepared to start the work out of the Happel Center on the energy reconfiguration there. Also met with all of the key stakeholders in the Juvenile Justice Center. There's a major remodel effort going on, or getting started there, so I spent a better part of a day in that meeting. Participated in the NACO West regional meeting, which was mostly just an update on pieces of federal legislation. And we also had our monthly Benton County Emergency Services Board meeting last week, and things are moving along there. I think that's about it for this morning.
Thank you. Commissioner Peck?
So to check my calendar, it seems like it's been 2 weeks since last Monday. So had the Council of Governments Executive Board meeting where normally I might not mention it, but this particular week we were scoring the Surface Transportation Improvement Program dollars, and those are monies that come from the federal government and the state government. They flow down to local jurisdictions, and all of that highway money needs to go through the local Council of Governments. And we have a process by which those are scored, and there were some questions about whether or not the scoring on those packages might have, under a new system, been exhibiting some favoritism from one jurisdiction over another. So we went through a lengthy process to ensure the integrity of those funds. Franklin County put in for a couple of substantial rural projects, which were both fully funded, and I think that reflects the quality of the package that our Public Works staff put together to submit for that. Had the Board of Health meeting, which I believe both you gentlemen were also in. Met with the senior leadership at WASAC, Washington State Association of Counties, and more specifically the Legislative Steering Committee, of which I'm a co-chair, and we're building the agenda for legislative actions that we, on behalf of the 39 counties, will take to the state legislature in January and February. So that's a process that has involved all 39 counties, and now we're narrowing it down to the ones that we believe are achievable and actionable. Yesterday had the Hanford Area Economic Investment Fund, which is a loan program under the State Department of Commerce funded with fees levied on people using the hazardous material dump at Hanford. And we went through current budget and loan accounts, and there's, I believe, $1.4 million roughly available in there for local municipalities, cities, counties, as well as private entities and small businesses for both, well, for loans and for the municipalities, in some cases, even grants. So that's probably enough for now. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
Yes, had the Board of Health. They're in the process of recruitment for new health officer as Dr. Amy Pearsons is leaving. There is also a decrease in COVID activity, and just wanted to mention the 988 Universal Suicide Hotline. Also attended the Good Roads meeting, discussion on the difficulties with the trucking distribution of goods, and also had the Benefits Committee, and then the local decision makers briefing, and also took part of the primary election pre-certification. And that is my update for this week.
All right. My update is started the state auditor's entrance exam for the Franklin County. Had a budget review meeting on Thursday. Of course, the Ben Franklin Health Board, where Dr. Amy Pearsons leaving the Ben Franklin Health District, but she's moving up the ladder to become a regional health director. And I asked her what her job responsibilities were. She really didn't answer, but she's been a good soldier, and I guess she's moving up the ladder for more pay. Next, we have the AC at the Public Safety Building, and I gave the okay that if it gets too hot in the building at public, that they can go head home. And then last but not least, today's my mom's 91st birthday. I'd like to wish Mom a happy birthday. So with that, we'll move down to the public comment. Anybody for public comment? Anybody on the phone, Keith?
No one on the phone.
Okay, next we'll move to the update on RFP on behavioral health provider for Crisis Center. Mr. Sullivan. And I see we have a special guest here, Jerome Delvin, in the room today.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning, Jerome.
Yeah, I wanted to, ouch.
I even dug out a tie for this special occasion.
I got rid of all my ties and suits.
I know. You and I have had 100 tie discussions. That's why I thought it'd be appropriate to wear it today.
But, no, I wanted to come back. I told you I'd try to get back and let you know what's going on different aspects of the Crisis Recovery Center. You know, as you know, the committee met a couple weeks ago. I guess it was a good meeting. I think you were there. I think, Rocky, you showed up too, I think, for a bit, yeah. So it was a good meeting. And in the meantime, Matt Rasmussen has put together an RFP to go out for a provider to run the Crisis Recovery Center. And it's been shared with the committee members. Your legal has gone through it with additions and such. And so I just wanted to check to make sure with you all that you have any expectations from that RFP or whatever. But I wanted to give you that update because we want to. From the beginning, I always said that when we start construction on that CRC, I want a provider picked by the committee, recommended by the committee and then picked so that they can be involved in the design since they're going to be operating it. And so that's why we're kind of pushing right now to get that RFP out as soon as possible. They would assist in the design with our construction, and then once the construction is finished, and then they'd move right in to start operating the facility. Again, your legal counsel looked at it too with ours. We're thinking about doing the RFP. The Benton County would be the contract holder with the provider, just to keep that simple. We can cover the cash flow, from that, and then ask for reimbursement from Franklin County once we're moving.
Excuse me, Jerome, is
yes.
that pretty much a parallel with how we are now doing human services, where Benton County administratively handles it, handles the personnel, the HR, the cash flow, the payments, and we, Franklin County, essentially become a subscriber.
Yes, exactly. That was my next,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that was my
Okay.
next
right.
point, was that we would run it as the human service model that we use now. And then we would also draft an asking for you, Franklin County, to work with our administrator, your administrator, with our, coming up with an MOU on that operation. Again, you know, I think we have the resource to manage that contract and the financial to make the payments on behalf of both counties. And then, you know, I think the MOU would, you know, how Benton County notify Franklin County of potential changes. Any changes would be driven by feedback, you know, from the committee. I mean, that's why we want them in place. But then also have a discussion with you and before we move forward with anything. The MOU would cover on services and how would they be paid for, and we're, Matt's looking at maybe, and the administrators maybe can come up with that, is we're looking at a population-based split right now, and then maybe look at the transition to something after we've collected enough data to see how that is, you know, the use of it. But that's, you know, just want to get your consensus on that, if that's something that our proposed method of doing the contract and having the county administrators work together to have an MOU and to get that in place too. Anything else, concerns or anything, but, you know, want to talk to you about that. But if we can get, you know, some kind of agreement this morning, that would be great on the MOU and how the contract, the RFP is put out. You know, I know we're going to have, as Keith Johnson said about, you know, the juvie, we're going to have a discussion about the juvenile too coming up soon. We're getting ready to pick a method or a model that they're close to picking, I think, what they want out of a remodel over there. So that's a meeting in the near future we probably need to have, but open for any questions, or I brought my expert with me. So.
Questions?
Yeah, Jerome, with respect to the old KGH building, you're looking at that for the juvenile facility?
No. A crisis juvenile, yes.
Yes.
Not the juvenile.
Oh, you're
criminal
talking about
system.
juvenile detention?
Detention, yeah, I'm talking about that.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, so really we've
use
got
the
three things going.
We'd have the detox at the KGH facility, the residential detox there. The other stuff would be on the Bruno site, I guess we'd call it. You know, would have the crisis stabilization, the, let me see, secure withdrawal management, and short-term observation, and then the residential detox would be at the KGH site.
So the juvenile detox, mental health is really all at the KGH. And the juvenile detention, of course, is the old building that we're
Right.
hoping to replace. Very separate issues.
Separate
I just want
issue,
to
right.
clarify that. And then are you still looking for a facility for the adult mental health treatment facility?
No, I think we have one down at that Bruno site.
Oh, okay, all right. And that's the one,
We're working on the lease now.
all right. And that's, I don't know how best to describe it, but off of Columbia Drive down there by the old Welch's plant?
Right, exactly.
In that area? Okay.
Exactly.
And the model for the adult facility, treatment facility, is the one that you're referring to on the MOU, or is that the juvenile
Well, it would,
mental health?
It would cover both.
You're going to cover both of them together?
right.
Okay,
Because
so,
we're expecting, well, I know, for the juvenile might be a separate provider.
yeah, well, that's where I'm going is.
Yeah, that may be a separate, but I think all the adult services, it would be the same provider. or
Yeah,
goal
I-
would be.
I just would ask you to at least think about whether or not it makes sense for those to be separate MOUs, because the populations and the rules and the funding and the percentage
Sure.
split are all different
Sure.
when you go from juvenile to adult.
Sure.
And so that would be one suggestion. I'll offer that since we went to the new model with human services, I think that the relationship between the counties has been very smooth, very professional. our costs didn't escalate. Our services are as good or better than they've ever been. So I think that model has proven itself, so I certainly support that.
We have a good director there.
Well, that helps a lot,
Kyle
as we
helps
both know. You did make one sort of passing comment, and I'm not sure if you were talking about juvenile detention, juvenile mental health substance, or adult substance mental health, but it was that the decisions would be driven by the advisory board. And while I appreciate the emphasis on the value of the advisory board and the decision makers listening carefully to everything they provide, I really think the decisions stay with the boards. And I just wanted to get some clarity when you said their decisions would be driven by that board. Maybe you could
Well, I
expand.
think, the financial is going to rest on both of our boards. I mean, anything the financial. But I'm talking about services being provided, the level of services. Hopefully, they'll have feedback. I think in the RFP, it calls for the provider to meet regularly with that advisory board to make sure that there's a good line of communication between the two. Because I'm counting on the advisory board, to keep an eye on the place, really. I mean, when it comes to finances, I mean, that's our arena, that's our duty to make sure financially that it's, but I think when it comes to what services are provided, they have, they're out in the community, they're listening, they're treatment providers, they're citizens that they should hopefully know what's needed by the community.
Yeah,
would
and
advise on
I
that.
endorse all that and I agree with it. But let me ask the question in the reverse, and maybe it gives a different context. If they're providing services at this facility that one or the other or both counties don't think is appropriate, but it's driven by the advisory board, presumably, ultimately, these boards make the decision and have the authority to say, no, we're not going to do that.
Sure.
Okay, so
And that
just
MOU
clarity.
would cover that.
Right, okay, well, just clarity, because when you said that the decisions would be driven by the advisory board, I just wanted to scope that so people knew what that really meant, and I take it to mean that all the parties will look first to that advisory board for advice, and so long as there's concurrence that those are reasonable, and I'm thinking reasonable in the mind of the provider and the counties, that we don't get in the way of the advisory board. But at the end of the day, the boards are accountable, and if they want to open up a service that we don't think is appropriate, we don't want to pay for, then
Well, yes, it
who
down to resources.
who actually makes that decision? And what I'm hearing is it's the parties to the MOU, it's
Right.
the counties
Right.
ultimately.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
You mentioned that the advisory board to pick a provider before the completion of the construction. What is the,
Yeah, let me clarify that, Commissioner Moore. For them to suggest or recommend a provider to the boards as the provider, I mean, I'm going to count on them to do the research and talk to, I mean, some of the treatment providers, they know who the providers are and what services are needed. I mean, that's why we put Kyle on that committee too, Human Service Director, to know. But, I mean, the county are the ones going to be hiring the provider. Contracts with the county, not with the advisory board. But I would ask them to do the due diligence to find the right provider that they think will fit in the community.
sure.
I think one thing, if I could add, I think we've toured a number of facilities operated by different agencies, and all of them said, the specifications for these facilities and making sure the state approves them and are fairly strict. And one of the things that was kind of universally talked about is the benefit of having a provider chosen to help design the facility to meet the needs that they'll have in administering the services. I know there was one facility that we looked at that we spoke with, was over on the west side of the state, that we spoke with the operator, and that was one of the facilities that the county built, and then hired them after the fact, and there were things that the provider wished would have been different to assist with the administration of the services. And So I think that's, that's what we're talking about with having recommendations for the provider before we start building, is so that we can make sure that we build the facility how we need it.
Yeah.
Which goes to the question is, what is the time frame for construction?
I don't think we've narrowed that down. I can't give you a good answer, Commissioner Mullen, sorry. I can't, right. I think we have a solid lease in hand and, with the provider in hand, and we got the design, that I think we can do it then.
All right, thank you.
I mean, I want this thing yesterday, but, I don't want to,
Yeah.
That's why I'm
the-
Okay,
curious
so
if we're looking 2
government
years down the
doesn't
road,
move.
3 years down the road.
yeah, government doesn't move that fast.
So the facilities you have toured, are you still in agreement with the one that you thought was the best
Well, I think.
down in Arizona?
Yeah, I mean, I think they ran a good facility, obviously, when, kind of, I think what we'd hoped for is when we issue the RFP, providers will present to the advisory committee on how they would operate that facility, and then the hope is that the advisory committee will come to consensus to recommend to the boards as to who to.
And the provider at that facility is the one that we're looking at too?
I think that they have an interest in bidding on the
Is
project.
that RIC or ours?
Yeah, RI International.
RI, yeah, they're already in this Washington State.
Yeah, they operate at several facilities on the west side of the state too.
Are they successful in their operations over there?
They are.
Yeah, they didn't, if you saw that report, are you familiar with that report from, I think it was the Times did a month or two ago about how many people were, denied entry into the facilities on the west side? RI didn't, none of their facilities came even on the radar of denying people. I mean, people were being denied because they used a sleep machine. They were in a wheelchair. I mean, that's one thing we noticed down in Arizona. No one's ever refused, right? I mean, they accommodate somehow. They don't refuse, and that's my goal. I don't want anyone turned away.
That concept is real appealing. It's,
Right.
we need to find reasons to work through barriers to having people admitted, as opposed to creating barriers to keep them from accessing services. So,
Okay, and the term you were using for the building down on Columbia Avenue is, what was it?
The Bruno,
Is that the old Welch's
That's
building?
the street
Part
name,
of it.
isn't it?
Part of the old
yeah,
Welch's
part
building?
of it. It's kind of off on the
Yeah.
side end.
I worked there when I was at CBC
Okay,
loading
okay.
trucks with
Well, this is,
Welch's juice.
this might not be there. This might not, that part is a newer building that's attached to the old one.
Okay.
So yeah.
So that would be the,
Right.
and then the last thing is the cost. You were talking about, you're going to go off a population. Is it going to be much like the juvenile justice?
Right, I think that's our
breakdown?
proposal, is to start out that way, right?
And are we going to look at then, after it gets going, about
Mm-hmm.
how many of these patients are Franklin County residents in Benton County and go through that
Yeah,
analysis?
look at the data, give a
Yep.
good year of data, and then we'll sit down
Okay,
and
that
have a
sounds fair.
discussion about it.
That sounds fair. Thank you.
Who is the provider in Bear County, Texas?
I think it's, what comes to mind is, it's the hospital, the county hospital.
I have a report back in my office. I can shoot you an email
Yeah,
later today.
All right.
I can't recall what, if the county operated the facility or if it was a contracted provider.
I want to,
Alright.
yeah, sorry, what comes to mind is the county, but, because they own the hospital system down there, but I could be wrong on that. It's been a long time since I looked at Bear County, but they're one of the early models of no wrong door, right, that they took anyone, everyone came in, even with slight, medical needs were taken care of, so it was just a drop off for police and fire. They were out the door, 5 minutes. They weren't standing around waiting for booking or anything like that.
I mean, it is recognized as one of the most successful. Yes.
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities, quite frankly, between the models.
All right, thank you.
So Kyle, with respect to the adult treatment facility, mental health and substance use disorder, the population that we anticipate would use that facility would you describe it as highly mobile or not mobile?
Mobile with regards,
Well, yeah, I need to, geographically, not physically. What I'm getting to is that in the Tri-Cities, one of the things that we know very well is that we have a river and some bridges, but our populations migrate back and forth all the time. And that seems to be even more so with people who are experiencing homelessness or other challenges, and whether it's mental health or substance use, and it's very migratory back and forth. And so in our various combined efforts, we use about 3 different models. One is a straight population breakout, and we share costs based on that. For juveniles, it is on an at-risk youth population, and there's a formula for calculating what that is. And then for our adult drug court, we actually, each county funds separately a certain number of seats. And so of those, given how migratory the population that I expect will be using the adult facility, I think it's going to be exceedingly difficult to assign the care that somebody is receiving to one county or the other. And it makes sense to me that a straight population break is going to be, over the long term, the most equitable. What's your thought on that?
yeah, it can be difficult. You know, a person can be homeless one day in Franklin County and the next day they're homeless in Benton County.
Right.
Typically for our local programs, how we try and assign, you know, because the local housing programs are tied to document recording fees, and Benton County dollars go to Benton County residents, Franklin County go to Franklin County.
Yeah.
And so.
Of course, that's housing, and we have an address, so that's easy.
Yeah, although a lot of the people that are transient, just because they're homeless in Benton County, you know, maybe, like I said, maybe the night before they were homeless in Franklin County, and so typically what we try and do is access their last known permanent address and assign it based off of that. And so I imagine there will be a percentage of this population, quite frankly, that would be the same. How great that is, I don't know. I would be curious to see what the data says after a year or two, and see if it's able to pare that down.
So then if we didn't use a straight population base to determine cost share, what would we use? You're going to attempt to identify a client who is here 1 month and 3 months later is back, but they're from a different county, and maybe it's Yakima County then, and maybe it's Walla Walla, maybe. I think that the administrative task of trying to do that with any degree of accuracy is an expensive and probably unnecessary challenge, because the mental health issue, substance use disorder, whether somebody lives in Benton County or Franklin County, it affects both. And so I'm advocating for a straight population split, just because I think it's, in my mind, after maybe, I don't know how many years you've been doing this, but I've been watching the process for 14 years, and it waxes and wanes. And any given day, a veteran, for example, receiving benefits on one side of the river comes to the other side. We have a system for that, unless they're homeless, right? And then we just look at whether or not they've received services from both counties within a certain time. Those other programs all seem to have mechanisms, but for this one, I don't know how you do it without just a population split. So that just, letting you know that's where I'm at.
Okay.
What do you do if you find residents that have King County addresses and Olympia addresses prior to their being put into our facility?
Yeah, and I think this facility, because, you know, of course, housing is a little bit different, because we require, for our local programs, we require residency in the county for 90 days before they can access the program.
So what do we do with those people then? Because I've been told by state troopers and other officials that they're busing them into our community.
Yeah, and that's not really been my experience. I've not seen that come up a lot. I think for the purposes of this facility, you know, it's a lot of the funding to develop the facility is coming from the state. So the expectation from the state is that if there's somebody in our county that's in need of services, that they're provided. Now, it's a little bit different if they have a King County address. They're you know, and that's something I think that the provider would need to work out with the managed care organizations and the ASOs on accessing funding from King County. I mean, there is a tie back to that. The reality is King County can choose not to pay if the client's
Gotcha.
down here. But I don't think we deny someone services, obviously, because
Okay. And then the last question would be, what about all the people crossing the border right now? Citizenship. What do we do about that?
yeah, and that'll be something, I think the providers deal with that right now. Somebody that's not a resident of the United States is not eligible for Medicaid benefits, and so there are state dollars, although the state dollars are dwindling, that cover that. But I think I know that there's particularly with involuntary treatment, there's a guarantee of payment through the ASO for someone who's involuntary committed, whether or not they have residency or not. They needed the treatment and they're presumed dangerous.
So,
Commissioner, I mean,
Go ahead.
if I may, I mean, if someone's brought to the door by law enforcement or medical or whatever, however they get to that door, I mean, I think the first 24 hours, my goal is that we'll cover that first 24 hours, right? That's the Arizona model. Then, that gives the provider time to figure out, okay, is this person already under care somewhere? If not, maybe we can transition them into a provider in the community, and let them, hopefully, they can determine all those issues you brought up.
Gotcha.
And then, we'll have to, as a counties, we'll have to come up with a plan on how we address that. I mean, if they're being brought in, because of a situation, then I think we don't, that's something, once they're stabilized, and I think then the provider can start looking at the different programs out there, because they're the ones gonna be going for the Medicare dollars. They're the ones going out for the private insurance, after that 24-hour period, they need to find treatment for that person and how that's gonna be covered, so.
Okay, thank you.
So Kyle, you've mentioned a few times the ASO, the Administrative Services Organization, which for the two counties, for us, is Greater Columbia Behavioral Health. Are you anticipating that they would contract with the new facility for services?
Yes.
And that being the case, dollars coming from the state into the ASO are earmarked by county, if I remember?
Correct.
So with respect to what I said earlier, a straight population basis, we'd have to make some allowance for ASO dollars to ensure that they were being spent in the appropriate county to stay clear of an audit with the state.
Right.
How might we do that?
And ultimately that will be the provider's responsibility. I mean, they'll be the ones that will hold the contract with not only the ASO, but the managed care organizations also for Medicaid payments, and for payments for uninsured people.
Yeah, and the MCOs are not paying for mental health treatment, are they? I thought that was
They
physical. They are now?
Yeah,
Okay, all
yeah,
right.
and that was kind of part of the integration, is, all of the mental health dollars used to go to the ASO.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was shifted about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for people, there were two columns, the ASO, which is largely the mental health side, and the MCOs, the managed care organizations, were the big insurance companies handling the mental, or the physical health, and they've
They
tried to
merged
merge
them.
those.
Actually, they were BHOs prior to that.
Behavioral health
ASO,
before that,
and all
right.
those acronyms,
Yeah.
it gets to be a bit much.
Okay, well, the bottom line was, earlier I was advocating for a straight population split, and there's just one wrinkle I see in that, and that's the state-directed dollars that go to individual counties. And something to perhaps look at is whether or not the state, and let me know if it requires legislation, we can take it through WASAC, but perhaps the state would identify us as a combined or regional effort so that we don't have that problem with the ASO split and it all flows in.
Right,
I'd be happy to take that up with the legislature if it helps.
okay.
And I know that former Senator Delvin will help me with that.
Sure, yeah, we got lots of time.
Well, thank you,
I don't have to
gentlemen.
drive with you, do I?
Who drove last time? I think it was me.
I was gonna say, we got a parking lot full of sheriff's cars. If you wanna buy some, I think we can make you a deal and And I brought employment applications with
We,
me today.
we only
too,
buy
so-
ones that haven't been wrecked.
Oh,
Well, thank you, Mr.
no,
Dovin and
and we'll
Mr.
be
Sullivan.
back, we'll be back when we get more on the actual lease and all that going, and we have, this is, right. I'll keep back.
Thank you for
Coming back.
entertaining our questions, too.
No, no.
Appreciate it.
Anytime, anytime. Thanks.
All righty. Next on the agenda, we're going to move into the Office of Public Defense, Prosecution. Mr. Ziegler.
I think they're public defense, but, you know,
Office of Public Defense.
I'm not sure, we already had the consent on the felony panel?
Yes.
Does that seat feel hot?
Somebody made a comment this morning about when things return to normal. And I'm here to tell you, from my perspective, from my office right now, to quote young Frankenstein, it's abnormal, and it's gonna be abnormal for the foreseeable future. I mean, we're in real trouble here. I'm very appreciative of the fact that you approved the pay raise for the felony adult panel upstairs. But I've already been advised we'll be starting out January 1st with one less attorney on that panel. I know everybody's anxious to get back to what was pre-COVID, but the 2-year pre-COVID created the backlog that's probably 70% of the current problem. All those cases piled up. Now we're seeing that we're getting all these filings. The judges and the prosecutors are on my case all the time about you have to do this and you have to do that. But I'm limited by Olympia to 12 a month per lawyer. And I've talked about this in all the time, but the years that I've been here about this, I have to keep everybody happy all the time, and I can't do it anymore.
could I just ask a quick question on that specific point? Is the biggest limiting factor the court availability or the number of attorneys? If we paid for a whole bunch more attorneys, wouldn't you still be unable to get them through the court schedule?
First of all, you've got to find attorneys that are qualified.
Right, but assuming we could, I'm really.
You can't.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you right now, you can't.
All right. Well, let's just say in a hypothetical, if we paid them enough money that we could find them, and you had all the attorneys you needed, wouldn't the court system still be a bottleneck for you?
Until we caught up with the backlog, you bet.
Okay.
Until we
And
can
I'm
get
sorry
back
for the
to
interruption, but that's something I've been wondering about is, we've got two problems, but which one's the imminent problem right now? Is it attorneys or the court?
The problem with paying more money to the lawyers, a classic example of what I'm dealing with now in juvenile. I just found out 2 weeks ago that the state is going to take over the civil proceedings, the dependency proceedings in juvenile. They've got a new bureaucracy in Olympia called OCLA. And these people, without any notice of any kind that I know of to you, or to Keith, or to the judges, or to Ms. Johnson's office, they simply waltzed in here and gave us what I sent up to you, this announcement. We're coming in January 1st, and we're going to take over that operation. We're going to offer the lawyers $132,000 to $144,000 a year to handle 45 cases max. Now, there's no way you're going to compete with that without seeing a lot of other things get dried up, because you're going to have to divert a lot of money to pay lawyers. When I went to this Oakland meeting 2 weeks ago with my counterpart from Benton County, these Olympia people, with the usual ivory tower stars in their eyes, were lamenting the fact that they couldn't seem to attract anybody that wanted to do the job at $132,000 to $144,000 a year. To which our rejoinder was, my counterpart in Benton, Mike Vandersis, well, hold it here. You're telling us that you want to hire 3 or 4, and they might get 3 of the 4 that we currently use, both counties. You might get 3 of those 4. And I said, who's going to take the excess over the 45 per lawyer? Well, they didn't want to answer that. And when Mike and I pressed on that, we still couldn't get an answer. And I'm going to tell you who they expect to take up the slack. But I'm expected to be able to find lawyers when they can't find lawyers at way more money than what we offer. And I've told you more than once, money's important, but money is not the answer, the only answer for government operations. There just seems to be a mindset in a lot of people that all I've got to do is throw a bunch of taxpayers' money at something and I'm going to solve a problem. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, well, I wasn't advocating for throwing money anywhere. My
No.
point was, where's your biggest problem? And what I'm hearing you say is, even if I fix the attorney problem somehow magically overnight, I've still got this backlog in the courts. And what I was really driving at, the second part of that was, if you've got a whole, fleet, use whatever acronym you want, for a bunch of attorneys sitting by ready to go, that doesn't do you any good, because you can only run so many cases through the system.
That's right.
And so I was looking ultimately, what is the balance? How many do you need? And how do we get there?
And honestly, I think the court would accommodate us. If our dockets start getting bigger, they'll just start splitting us off into either separate courtrooms or adding a second docket day. That's
Yeah.
not a big deal. It's the shortage of attorneys.
Right, okay.
That's the big deal.
Well, not being an advocate of throwing taxpayer money anyway, I'd ask you, how do you attract them?
I don't know. I've done everything I can think of, short of free trips to Disneyland or,
I can vouch for the fact that public service can be overrated.
I did the job for 35 years for Benton County, and nobody ever foresaw what we're dealing with today. Nobody. But, I don't want to start a war here, but the interest of the state don't run in tandem with the interest of the counties. There's a fundamental mismatch here. And there seems to be an attitude in Olympia, well, we're just going to come in and tell you what you're going to do. We're going to tell you what the standards are going to be, and we don't care how you do it. You're just going to get it done. And I'm fed up with it. Now, this Okla thing, nobody told me anything about that. I was never told of any legislative hearings on this proposal. I asked Keith, he said, I don't know anything about this, before I gave it to him. The judges didn't know anything about it. And yet here they come waltzing in here and say, okay, we're just going to take it over, which sounds great. Except then they turn around in the next breath and tell you, but gee, we're having a terrible time trying to find lawyers that want to do this work. We'll
they'll-
join the club.
Then they'll kindly give it back to us.
Oh, yeah, after they make a mess. They may end up with a backlog over in juvenile before they're done.
Sure.
Because they're not going to have enough attorneys to do the caseloads.
And other counties in eastern Washington or across the state having exactly the same problem?
I suspect so. Sure.
The only thing I could think of, and we've got a space issue, but would be to make these full-time employees, make a full-time office where they're getting benefits and sick leave, because one of the issues right now is if a Washington lawyer works in public service for 10 years, they can get their law school loans written off. So that is a huge thing that contracted attorneys don't qualify for, because they're considered private employees or private lawyers.
Okay. First time I've ever heard that. That's pretty compelling, actually.
That is a compelling reason, which is why we're starting to attract some of the ones in law school now to our office, because, and that's why one of the actually attorneys that we stole from the city of Pasco joined, because he has the ability to write his loans off if he stays in public service for 10 years.
And we do that now with our contractors.
So can you at some point propose a model in which OPD had employees and not contractors that would roll up and identify for us the costs and the pros and cons?
We could try, but I know that Jennifer and I've talked about, they're down to hiring what are called Rule 9 interns,
Right, Title IX?
which is a possibility, but I have to meet the Supreme Court guidelines. Now, I was told last week the Supreme Court is now in the process, maybe after a lot of pressure was put on the 9 judges, that they need to revise these standards, and soon, because they've literally shut down the market, the hiring market. Because even without restrictions, the prosecutor's office has labored long and hard to try to find people that are willing to do the job.
Yeah, well, indigent defense is one of the perennial issues with the State Association of Counties and the legislative group. As you know, you and I have talked
Yeah.
about this. It's the classic unfunded mandate where the state mandates that we do it, but they only fund it partially at about 30%, if I remember. And it's bankrupting some of the smaller counties because of these costs. So hopefully somebody in Olympia gets a clue and and fixes it, but I'm not optimistic, which is why I'm coming back to, if the only thing that we see on horizon that might get us through is to look at converting some of these to employees, some or all, then I'd be interested in seeing what that takes. What's it cost? Is it viable? Are the attorneys even available?
We also have an issue of space. We're busting at the seams in this courthouse, and we're completely out of space in my office with no room to go, and our crime just grows year after year. So we've got to keep up with it somehow. And we add more police officers or sheriffs, and that just leads to more arrests, which leads to more need for prosecutors, which leads to more need for defense attorneys.
And the whole thing is driven by more people, and we're the
Right.
fastest
our
growing county.
population- Right, so I mean, our crime rate per person might stay the same or be down, but our population has skyrocketed so much that crime is naturally following. So I don't know, I know we mentioned at one time possibly buying the post office downtown. I mean, I don't know if there's something like that where we can shuffle departments around or something to make space for added employees, but it's definitely gonna be a need in the next few years, and definitely if we make OPD a full-time office.
Well, I've advocated for years to sell off our surplus properties and put them into an annex, and I've even identified a couple of buildings that would be candidates for that. It wouldn't be appropriate to speak to now, but I still contend that that's what we should be doing.
So, Mr. Ziegler, you're presenting today, and I know it's out of frustration. What would you give us, commissioners, a word of wisdom from you on how to unite the other counties to go against this?
I just, my impression is there's just too many surprises.
But I'm asking,
I don't know how all the county commissioners east of the Cascades, I'll tell you right now, in the legal profession, the lawyers on this side of the Cascades are not regarded as being of the same timber and qualifications as the lawyers on the west side,
that's even
particularly in the bigger
residents.
counties.
That's even residents. That's the mentality of the
It
west
is the
side.
mentality, and we deal with it all the time, and I'm sure that Jennifer, as prosecutors in King County, looked down on Franklin County and Benton County and Kittitas and Klickitat. We're just a bunch of hillbillies that are always chasing this and chasing that and trying to catch up to them in terms of our social awareness and our sensitivities, and we're not quite smart enough to do it on our own. So they're gonna show us how to do it. And it's very frustrating. And you're asking about recruitment? That's why 9 out of 10, if not 99.99 out of 100, would-be young lawyers are not gonna have anything to do with this job on this side of the Cascades. They know. It's rotten work. And nobody's really gonna support you. The Court of Appeals isn't gonna support you. The Supreme Court's not gonna support you. The Office of Public Defense in Olympia doesn't care one whit about the welfare of the lawyers that provide public defense in this state. All they care about is the rights of the criminal defendant, to the exclusion of everything else. And if you don't understand that going in, you're gonna get flattened. And that's just the way, it's bigger than me, and I'm certainly not gonna go in there and pound on the door and try to fight the fight all by myself. It's just not gonna work. But if nothing else, I mean, I'd like to see all the counties east of the Cascades say, you know, we're all in this ship together, and we are.
Well, I think 39 of the 39 counties have taken the position that indigent defense is an unlawful, constitution violating, unfunded mandate, and we pushed on the legislature every year for years.
Right.
And we're just not seeing any traction. So for as disappointing as that is, that's the reality.
And you'll never get a Supreme Court to find the legislature in contempt like they did on school financing. And that's the bottom line, and that's the attitude you're up against.
Yeah, well, I think we really kind of focused on the root of the problem.
So let me ask you this, on the 10 years public service and all their college fees who's responsible for that, the state or us, the employer?
No, it's a state-run program, or is it federal?
Which one?
The 10-year write-off.
That's a federal program.
That's federal.
That's a federal program?
Yeah.
It does not fall on us at all.
It applies for attorneys, and I think there's some in the public health arena that they can get
It's public
loan
health,
forgiveness.
It's teachers, it's just. it's
Education,
ones that are in
yeah.
the public interest.
Couldn't we use that as advertisement then, to
Oh,
encourage
we
them?
certainly can,
Well,
yeah.
let's do.
But we have to make them
Most
employees,
law school
which
graduates
is why I
are
was
applying to that in
asking.
their senior year. They know that. That's why a lot of them end up, they go in the military, work for the Judge Advocate Corps, public health, any government agency. I mean, I sign those forms all
Certain
the time.
501 programs that they can work for as a
Yeah.
public service.
But the gap is that our employees are contractor, or our attorneys are contractors, not employees. So going back to 10 minutes ago, would you be willing to put together a proposal that says how we can use the federal program to add additional attorneys? And what I heard you say was, even if we had that ability, the attorneys aren't available.
I'm afraid that's reality.
So is it worth going through the exercise and giving it a try?
Sure. It's worth a try. I mean, I'll try anything.
And we also
I
heard,
think the attraction of, having the retirement and medical and all that stuff is, and having paid support staff and not having to rent office space or paying for CLEs or insurance, stuff like that. I mean, there's lots of benefits definitely to being a full-time employee, and I just think it's the last avenue we haven't necessarily tried,
and we're gonna need more space.
but we need more space.
You need more of everything.
Okay.
A lot more.
Any more questions?
I'm sorry.
Thanks for.
No,
the-
it's good.
No,
And
no,
I
I'm
did
sorry.
seek an audience for you with the Wasac, weekly Monday meeting, and there were some counties that said, well, if they get to, we get to, and pretty soon it was going to be a gang of attorneys in there briefing us. So cooler heads prevailed, and we said, one attorney's good, but we don't want 20 of them yelling at us.
I understand WASAC is considering making this a matter of litigation.
So there is a litigation committee as well that I'm on, as well as the legislative steering committee. And we initially did the one on ballot boxes because we thought that was a drop-dead simple, easy thing, right? It's an unfunded mandate. We're required to do elections. They're telling us we got to add all these additional drop boxes for ballots. And we've got to have additional people because you can't send one person to handle ballots. You got to, so all these strings attached to it. We were pretty sure, and our attorneys were sure, that it was pretty black and white. And then the court came back and said, no, actually, there's a mechanism for you to tax the people to pay for this. Therefore, it's not an unfunded mandate because you have a vehicle, a way to pay for it. And they're trying to say the same thing about indigent defense, is that we could run a measure for a public safety tax that would pay for it, and therefore we have a vehicle. So we're concerned that it may not be viable litigation for that reason.
I'd say it's dead on arrival.
Well,
I hate to say that.
well, you're absolutely right. I'm trying to be a little tactful. I mean, I know it's out of character for me, but let me at least try.
I mean, after they made their decision in McClary, when the legislature, they pounded the table, the Supreme Court said, well, you have the mechanism to tax, you know how to have
Exactly.
committee hearings and make it an equitably financed system statewide, but you didn't do it, so we'll find you in contempt until you do it.
Right, and that's exactly the historical model for the legislature, is they tell the counties what to do, and then they tell the counties to tax their citizens to do it.
Exactly.
And if you don't do it, you're in contempt, and if you do it, you've just taxed your citizens unreasonably.
That's right. And then, of course, you have a Supreme Court that likes to tell us they're not a super legislature, which is exactly what they've made themselves. I'm sorry. I wished I had better news.
I think we both feel strongly about this one.
Very.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler.
Thank you.
For brightening our day.
Officer in charge of laundry and morale.
All right, next we'll move to the step for the auditor's office employment. Tom? Mr. Westerman.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
I guess I'll take this as good timing. Our presentation is about hiring problems as well. And as you can see from the ASR, we've had positions open since May, and almost nobody is applying for them. In fact, the one applicant that applied for Tim's opening job starting in October, we've had one applicant and they didn't even call back. But we're here today for an accountant 4 position. We would like to offer a person step 4 as I know that's unusual, you've gone up to step 3 as lately. She's willing to come in at a 4 and not take a pay cut. This is a former employee, she was an intern of ours, she knows our system, has done our payroll and accounts payable. So we would like to make her that offer so she comes back to us, and we feel like she'll be an employee here for quite a while. We also feel maybe too that we're having problems because of maybe the inflation. Our salary schedules were built before, the current problems we're having, and that's got to be weighing in on people's decisions to come to the county. So primarily we're here for the accountant 4. We've also made an offer for our accounts payable position that opened up due to some vacancies in the accounting department. And we offered her the grade 13, step 1, but she would like to come in higher, but we feel like if we offer her a step 2, that she would come in on that. And she's got a degree and lots of experience that would benefit the county. And so this is kind of a two-part thing. One, we would like you to approve the resolution granting the step 4 for our accountant 4, and then consent agenda next week for a step 2 for accounts payable opening.
So I'd appreciate seeing the separate personnel action in a separate package. Prefer not to mix the two. On the step 4, I appreciate the fact that you're very upfront about the fact that that's unusual to go all the way to a step 4. But I'm looking at the salary for the position too, and I've been doing this more and more lately, is maybe a little less attention on the number of the grade and the number of the step, but look at the salary and what the responsibilities are. So could you summarize for us what it is this position would be responsible for so we can get a sense? Because I see a salary of $55,731 at the step 4, and depending on the level of responsibility, that may be entirely reasonable. I'm just not sure I have a good picture of what they would be doing.
Sure. This position does a variety of things. Currently, they're training our payroll person because they had the job previously. So we had a payroll opening. They go through all the vendors as far as going through the process of making sure they're valid. The IRS approves them. They help us with the annual report processing, which are our financial statements for the state auditor's office. They do supplemental work with our budget. Basically, they're a core central position within our accounting department that kind of they help us with a variety of different factors. They process, you can help me out with some of these too, Tim, some of our quarterly reporting. So it is a professional position. We've always had a degree at accountant there. Once we get our office up and staffed, we would like to see this position do even more accounting and with our financial statements and budget. So,
As I recall, she has a degree.
she does have a business degree, yes.
So you said something in the middle of that that caught my ear, and that was that she does the IRS mandated review of our vendors to ensure that they're compliant, and not to drudge up painful history, but that was exactly the process that identified the Houston embezzlement. The IRS said you need to verify your vendors. The person sitting in this role, this function, is the one who identified that and brought it to everybody's attention. So it is a significant position in the realm of protecting public assets. And we spend millions upon millions with vendors. And if we do nothing else, ensuring that those checks are going to real vendors and we're getting real value is significant responsibility. So I'll roll out. I just have one other quick question, and that is, she's been gone for a few years. Remind me how long she was with the county?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. And then she went and worked in the private sector for about 3 years?
Yes,
Okay.
from 2020 through 2022, so
So-
about two.
If she had never left and stayed here, what step would she be at now?
She would be at a 13.7.
13, I think this
We
says,
did have a reevaluation a year ago where it would put her
is
at
it
about
a 13 or grade 15?
It'd be a grade 13.7, sorry. But a year ago, those positions were reevaluated, so she would be at a 14. Would it be a 7 now, Tim, you think? Yeah.
So if she'd stayed, she'd probably be a 14.7.
7.
And now we're asking for a 15.4.
15.4, and the position that was vacated was budgeted at 15.7. So there's actually some budget savings, if you will, on that.
Yeah, having the money available is good, but it doesn't, to me, it's not a justification for spending it. It's what's the job. So we're really talking, what would have been a 14.7 compared to a 15.4. Do you have a rough idea what the monetary gap is between the two?
14.7 would be 58,675, and a 15, you said 2?
4.
Or 15.4?
You're asking for a 4, it's
Okay, 15.4 would
55.
be 55,731, so it actually would be less.
So she'd be coming in at a 15.4, making less than if she had stayed here throughout. See, what I don't want to do is reward somebody for leaving us and then coming back. So when you do the math, she went out in the marketplace, she got outside private sector experience. She's coming back, and she's coming back at a rate that's lower than what she would be paid if she had stayed here.
Yes, I believe so.
And so, given the gravity of the position, I think I can find my way to make an exception on it, say I think I can support this one. It's unusual, but the combination of the shortage of people, the narrowness of the talent pool that is available for it, you know, to have a degreed person who can do this kind of accounting, the significance of our county's history in terms of the role that this position has played in protecting the county, the fact that she's bringing private sector experience, and the fact that she's not coming in after leaving us and making more. She's actually taking a little bit of a hit for leaving. So it's unusual, but I think I can support it. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen, anything?
No, I think that if you have the opportunity to hire somebody that you have worked with in the past and know their work ethic and have the opportunity to hire them, I would move forward.
I have nothing further to add, so with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve Resolution 2022-198. as
Second.
presented.
There's been a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2022-198. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you very much. On the second point for our accountant, 2 position for accounts payable, we just want to offer a grade of 13.2, and I believe she'd accept that. Would you be willing to agree to a consent agenda item for that next week, or do you want us to come back in again?
As long as there's an ASR that gives me the background to justify it, putting on a consent is fine. We always have the option, if we think there's a lot of questions, to pull it from the consent and do it separately anyway.
Okay.
So I'm fine with that approach.
Okay,
Yes.
appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, 13.2, what kind of metrics are we?
13.2 is 41,710 versus 39,722.
Again, I'd just like to have the background to see what the job duties are compared to the salary.
Sure, you bet.
Yeah.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll move down to the county business vehicle policy, return revised. And I believe Mr. Johnson.
Yes, I'm going to be very brief. This is brought back the board's request from last week, seeking more input. I've received a couple of comments from county employees and elected officials. I noticed there's several here in the room that have been specifically invited to participate. I think today's opportunity is really to have more of a discussion, answer questions, seek input. I'm not necessarily looking for adoption of the resolution today unless the board feels like it's ready to go, but I think having some additional input from those that are most affected by the policy, give them an opportunity to speak directly to the board.
And thank you, Mr. Johnson, for putting that email out there, inviting them. So if there's any county department heads who would like to weigh in on this, please come forward.
So I did submit to the administrator some questions that I had on several different bullet points. I think some of you may have had some of those or gotten information on them. One of the things that concerned me a little bit is most or a bunch of our vehicles are through the ER&R, which is the Public Works. The Sheriff's Department and our department, the vehicles are through our departments. And we answer to the commissioners, budgetary-wise, we request permission to purchase them, we request the funds to purchase them, and to be honest with you, I can be a little bit blunt, I haven't asked Mommy and Daddy for the keys to the car since 1971, which was before any of you were legally driving. So, unless you were in maybe Idaho at 14. So, I think it's restrictive in a lot of ways. I think that there's some questions. I certainly brought it out on bullet point 4.6 on the indemnification of covering individuals using their own personal cars. The way that it's stated here, and the district attorney's office responded to me in writing saying basically that the commissioners on a case-by-case or a item-by-item could approve damage or liability to coverage or indemnification on a case-by-case basis. And to be honest with you, I'm a little reluctant to use my own car based on what might be, maybe, kind of, sort of, at that point or day and time. So I have access to vehicles through our department. Not every department has access to them. We have even had another elected official in department that needed access to a vehicle that we loaned them the ability to use one of our cars on a particular day to do county business. I certainly would like the freedom and ability as the elected in my department to be able to make that kind of a decision for the benefit of the county. The other thing is, currently I don't have any appraisers that live way out in North County, okay? At some point I may have, and I certainly would be more inclined to assigning them a vehicle during parts of the year where they would go straight from their residence right into the field out in that blocks 30, 40 miles out versus drive in here with their personal vehicle, get the county vehicle, drive another 35, 40 miles out, waste 2 hours of time, and do that in the evening to drop the car off versus just get in the car, get the job done, spend 2 hours more efficient time and at least 100 miles less driving on county vehicles. I'd like that ability to be able to make that decision without having to come and ask permission if that's the case. The other item, and I'll bring this up to commissioners and for public information just so they have it, there may be a time where we find that we've used the county vehicle for personal use. Maybe we're using the county vehicle and we're driving to places and all of a sudden we say, well, I'm gonna run over here and have dinner. I'm at this conference. And yes, it says we can kind of do that. So for the sake of just clarity and openness, I had a vehicle break down 3 times in 2 months, my own personal vehicle. Had nothing else to drive. I did use one of the county vehicles. I went to the auditor's office, says I need to know what the reimbursement rate is. I logged it down and I paid the county for 159 miles over a 2-month period of time that I used it to get home and get back to this office to do the job. Now, I've probably used my personal vehicle close to 1,000 miles in the last year that I haven't put down or charged a penny for. But that doesn't make any difference. I don't want the appearance of wrongdoing, and therefore I definitely submitted my choice not to submit my personal use. My choice, the county needs to be reimbursed for anything that we use for them. I don't see anything in here covering something like that should it happen or there be a need, and I don't want it to be a habit. I just was stuck and I needed to still work for the county and do a job. So I'm just being straight up front with you and the public that you know exactly what that was. I cut a check to the county ahead of time, met with them ahead of time to make sure that was open. So I think it's restrictive in some ways. I think that the department heads, the elected officials, if we're not doing our job, hold us accountable, pull our funding, you know, have us recalled, don't vote for us the next election. Otherwise, let us run our departments and get some things done. So that's just some input from me. Definitely, I'm a little leery on 4.6. I would certainly, if I'm using my own vehicle going forward, I'd like to know the county's got my back. Because if somebody knows that I'm driving my vehicle, whether my fault or not, and I get into an accident and they know I'm doing it for county business, listen, I'm wide open for a lawsuit, and I know my insurance is gonna be the first one on the line, but I want the counties backing me if I'm using it for county business, which is thin to none going forward, because I'll use one of our department cars for any county business. So, anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth on some of it, okay?
Thank you. Any other elected department heads?
I guess a couple things for me is, for sure, a policy like this is appropriate for Franklin County as we grow to try to, get some definitions and other items codified. The thing that this was kind of out of the blue, I guess, for me, I understand that Matt Mahoney had worked on it, at least that's what I gathered, and then we're bringing it forward. And I'm hoping the process can be a little more deliberate. Some of the things that I gathered in it is in my department, and I've talked to some of you, especially the things that have gone on in the last year, and as we grow, I have unionized employees that work in elections. And actually, we will need to get a vehicle issued specifically for elections to pick up ballots and do that kind of stuff. We have a lot of personal vehicle use, emptying ballot boxes during elections and that kind of stuff. And so this policy will impact BARG and non-BARG. And I'm curious on, even from a union standpoint, there are, there's references in there to them having to provide their driving record, references to conditions in which they can be dismissed. And so I'm just want to make sure all these things have been, and then not only that, the indemnification piece, it seems that on that 4.6, I mean, has this been weighed against the county code, that does indemnify people? And it talks about you have to have prior approval. It just feels like a little bit like what they were talking about, what Public Defense was talking about, where, well, I think we need this. Sometimes if we're try to be too all-encompassing, it can be confusing. There's references to county codes. It may be nice to whatever code they're referencing, especially if I'm going to use this to implement it, to know where to go to find that code that they're talking about. So I do support the idea of something like this. I'm just hoping that we can, make sure that we spend the time to make sure everybody's involved in completing it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Commissioners, it sounds to me like you need to develop some pool cars that are here for all the different departments and employees to use. I'll make sure the cars that we're taking offline get sent so that there's sets of pool cars. I know I have some lent out there already. But it sounds to me that pool cars would probably be the most efficient way to go, and you figure out some sort of check-out, check-in system. As far as elected officials go, last I heard, you either had a choice, you drove a county car, or you took a stipend, and that stipend includes that you have insurance without any rules. So it sounds to me like, just like Matt said, is we're growing pains, and probably the quickest way is to fix it by starting to develop pool cars and just have them available for use.
So I want to clarify one thing. My understanding is there are 4 electeds that have the ability to have a car and/or get a stipend, and that's you 3 commissioners and the prosecuting attorney. Mm-hmm. I believe that's the only 4 employees or electeds in the county that have that right by current resolution.
It's actually by state law. It's actually in state statute.
Okay, so which resolution could also increase, modify, do whatever they want to on that. My department wouldn't need a pool automobile, although we have loaned one of our automobiles to another department, which a pool vehicle would maybe assist them on that. I just need the ability Not the right to abuse, but the right to manage the cars that are assigned, purchased, and under my department. But certainly other departments have other varying needs, which I think should be addressed overall. So, thank you.
Anybody else?
I'll add one thing really quick. I like the pool car idea. We tried to do that. Actually, we're looking at Enterprise or something 10 years ago. So hopefully we can keep one of the SUVs or something for the bigger boxes of ballots and that kind of stuff. But absolutely, if we can repurpose something and use it in that way. As far as the elected reimbursement or covering local travel, yeah, there's, I'm in the process and have talked to several other electeds, and hopefully this board during the budget process will take another look at how that is handled and what's appropriate for Franklin County. I've reached out to 4 or 5 other counties, and everyone does it a little bit different. The setup we have has no more basis than theirs does in law, other than the fact that we can do what we're currently doing. It's fairly typical, and even I haven't gotten Benton counties yet, but yeah, at this point there is only 4, and some counties have nothing, and some counties, as far as not encompassing everybody. But my hope is to bring some data forward during the budgeting process, and we can take a universal look at the whole thing based on other counties and the impacts on that. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Just want to support the idea of the pool car. I think that's important. Our office, of course, we use the E&R with our vehicles, and we abide by their policies. We also have our own policies. One thing I think I'd be careful of is, which we all hate, is micromanaging. We don't like Olympia telling us what to do. I think each department should have that latitude of developing their own policy, having it approved maybe by your board. But let's not micromanage, because we hate that from the up above ourselves. Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, Keith, I think we got enough information. We better revisit this.
Yeah, we'll certainly take another look at when's the right timing to bring this back. If that's in the budget process, then maybe that's the appropriate time to do it.
Good input. And thank you again very much for inviting them in here, because I think that we need to listen to our department heads, because it affects them. All right, thank you very much. Next, we'll move down to the public hearing declaring the real property as surplus, the Wilson House. And at this time, I'll open the public hearing. So if there's any presentation, Keith, or?
Yeah, I
you wanna
think I
give a
can
little-
be brief just to kind of open the dialogue here. This is a legally required step in liquidating any real property owned by the county. Requires a public hearing and a declaration that the real property is considered surplus or not needed by the county. We've been through a number of discussions about the Wilson House that it's currently being leased by LifePoint. That lease, I believe, goes through the end of this calendar year. We are arranging a local auction house to be the auctioneer for the property. But this essential step of a public hearing and declaring it as surplus is a necessary step in that process. So it's kind of a formality, but it's required by state law.
Okay, so it is open to the public. If there's anybody on the phone or anybody in the room that would like to speak on this?
So you are looking at a local auction agency and not going with the one they've used in the past?
Yeah, the Treasurer's Office typically uses a service called GovEase, which is a national auction, but we're getting RFP feedback from the local auction companies.
All right, thank you.
So you're getting feedback from multiple ones?
Yeah.
You've reached out to all of them?
Yes.
Okay. All righty, if there's no public comment, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion. I believe it's Resolution 2022-200.
Move to approve Resolution 2022-200 as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2022-200. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All righty, well, now we're down to administration office business. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, just for the board's information, there's no action required, but we did receive a report back from the state auditor's office regarding some questions around the prosecuting attorney's vehicle use and reimbursement for mileage that had taken place over the past number of months. The prosecuting attorney, when he became aware of it, refunded or remitted back to the county an overpayment that had occurred, and the state auditor's office was satisfied with that result, that things were taken care of. They encouraged us to be cognitive or conscious of our accounts payable process and making sure that we're not duplicating payments to anyone going forward, but they did not have any more of a formal request than that. It was just acknowledgement that this had been resolved. Then I would like to convene a short executive session to discuss qualifications of an applicant for employment or review performance of a public employee.
Okay,
We can do that after
public comment. So with that, we'll move into public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
No one on the phone.
George Dockstetter. It's obvious that, according to Mr. Ziegler and the other young lady, that we've got problems handling the population we have now. And I would like to say to the county commissioners and administrator, we don't need to just be worrying about today. You need to be looking forward to the next 20 years. We're gonna be basically doubling the population in this county in less than 20 years from the last census. We're gonna need a whole lot more help and things to take care of and look forward to. The new Tarragon project. What are we gonna do about roads? And we need to start thinking forward 20 years instead of worrying about next year and right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to pick up where George left off because I'd intended to address this today, and then George started it. We're at least 10 years behind on properly planning for growth in this county for an annex building or something else. Our office has grown like crazy for demands and needs. The county has grown like crazy. I mean, just the new construction this year is, well, you'll see it during the budget talks and the increase in actual construction, which increases directly your budgets, not just the 1% if you decide to vote it in, but it gives you immediate, and the city of Pasco, immediate funds that if we don't get that done, you won't have, nor would the city or Con-El or anybody else on that. I would really strongly encourage this board to turn the county administrator loose on getting some initial plans going, something for the growth of this county, the expansion. Almost every office in this courthouse has already grown to capacity. Even with the move that we made this last year, I've got room for one desk. And we're already, the extra work coming in, just, to be honest with you, I thought would take 3 years at least. I informed you last year, we're about 3 years. It's here already. And I figured it'd be 3 years out there. So the rate of growth is not going to slow down. And if you think we've got a problem right now, and we're already behind, we're going to have a massive problem in another year or two if this continued. So I'd really encourage the board to start looking for plans for expansion, growth, development, what you need to do, because we're already way behind. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Just clarification, when you say plan for expansion, growth, et cetera, you're talking about county facilities?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah,
Okay,
county
thanks.
facilities, and staffing for that as well, yes.
He made me do it.
I knew you couldn't resist.
Couldn't resist. Look around you.
By the way, you have the newest, biggest, best-looking building in the campus, so
That's
I hope you're not looking for
Look
another one.
across the street out here, look next door, look across the street this way. We need to start acquiring property around this complex for the future. It ain't gonna get any cheaper. Doesn't matter what you do with it today, but we need to acquire it in order to accomplish growth. It's coming whether we like it or not.
Right.
It's interesting listening today how everybody's whining and crying and talking about all this growth. And it's coming. You can shut your eyes, but it's coming. And we as a county are going to have to figure out ways to make the community a little bit better and how we're going to build around this campus. Because this campus isn't leaving. It's a historical registry building, so we need to learn how to build around it, and that starts with acquiring properties and thinking out into the future.
Okay, so with that, is there any other public comment? Seeing none, Mr. Johnson, how long of an executive session do you think?
Probably 15 minutes.
Okay,
I would just like to add too that the Ben Franklin Transit is going to be transporting people to the Ben Franklin Fair. If you've never had the opportunity to ride the transit, I think now's a good opportunity because you literally can sometimes wait a very, very long time in line to get in. It's very convenient. They drop you off at the gate, they pick you up at the gate, and I think it's a great opportunity for anybody that could ride the transit and see the benefit that it is there for the community.
all righty. So, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, so we request a 15-minute executive session under RCW 42.30, point 1101G. Evaluate qualifications of applicant for employment or review performance of a public employee. Would ask that members of the board and the county administrator participate in that discussion.
Are you anticipating a request for action following, or is that unknown?
No, I don't think I'll request action today.
Okay.
All righty, with that, we'll Okay, we've come out of executive session, and Mr. Johnson, I got a couple questions for you. Number one is, are we currently looking at these properties close by the courthouse here to acquire? And how are we doing on that?
Yeah, I've made a general inquiry to the owners of the property just to the north of us. We haven't actually been able to connect. He's been out of town in California a lot, but we have not actively pursued the little building here across the street, but that may be a possibility. That's owned by Bob Thompson, many of you know, served on the Richland City Council for a number of years, and local attorney.
What about the facility down there that we were entertaining joining with the city on?
The bank building downtown is still available. That is a possibility. It's a bigger building.
I'm sorry, which building is this?
I think it's the Bank of America.
Yeah.
Down on, across from the post office on Lewis.
Is it Bank of America, or there was another bank there? I think Bank of America is still in business, isn't it? They're open right now, no?
No.
Just the cash machine out front.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
so it is the Bank of America
Yeah.
building?
Yeah. it's
Is
that.
the city still pursuing it?
The city would like the county to jointly participate in either leasing or purchasing that building. I walked through it with Mike Gonzalez and the Realtor, but it would require quite a bit of internal reconfiguration to make it functional, but that would be the case with any existing building.
Okay.
But it is a possibility of.
And then as far as the Ben Franklin Fair, the distribution of tickets and passes, is all of the county departments getting some of this?
No, we had tickets that we gave to the elected officials. Gave them a entry pass, a parking permit, and each of them were offered at least one night of the host dinner.
Okay.
I do have, I think, 4 Saturday dinner tickets and 2 Friday dinner tickets left. So if you know somebody wants those, I can make those available.
I think we need to make that available to them, maybe in an email to the
Yeah.
county department heads so that they may, and I may have some that I'll donate back too. No use letting them go to waste, so would like to also ask my other commissioners if they're not using them, maybe to donate them back so some of the department heads and the other elected officials may have an opportunity to enjoy the fair too.
Yeah, I donated some of mine back, about
Okay.
half of them.
Yeah, I think that's where those came from.
And I think I've donated some of mine back every year, probably will again this year. The only thing I'd add that hasn't been said is that, you know, these tickets are a response to the county's sponsorship. And when I go, I make it a point to be there and talk to people about county issues and represent Franklin County. I'm not just going there to enjoy the fair. Certainly I do that too. But I think we should keep that in mind. If we want to use them as incentives for employees, that might be an exception. But generally speaking, I think the purpose of these is to go and be seen and represent the county. So just my thought.
All righty, is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.